Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Dr. Burchett Show. I'm joined with Drew Burchett, my cousin, who just completed an Ironman. He's a PhD in physical therapy. And in this episode, we were going to talk about it in the last episode, but we got into the motivation stuff and couldn't leave it alone. In this episode, we're going to talk about what you do during a race, especially to replete your sodium, because you lose that a lot. I'm curious about what you eat before, what you eat when you're training, and then what you do when you're training. And Drew's going to put together just some notes on what he does about these things. And to get some of that, go to my website and give me your email, and I will email you that stuff. So let's start with, like a couple days before the big race. What do you eat? Do you carb load? What do you avoid?
There is some research about carb loading, but it's kind of hit or miss, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The most important thing, make sure you're hydrated. Absolutely, make sure you're hydrated. And hydration is not just water. It's not just drinking water. It's making sure you've got all the electrolytes at a decent level in your body. For me, that's I take in it's a little electrolyte tablet that it's effervescent, so it bubbles up in water. It's called Nuun. It's what's called Nuun.
Okay.
And it's a higher level of electrolytes than Gatorade, and
Okay.
there's 0 calories in it. That's the one part that I really enjoy too.
Nuun. Nuun.
Correct.
I'm going to look this up. And there's no calories, which is nice because Gatorade is full of sugar.
Exactly.
So you take how many of these? Like, let's say a couple days before, or like one a day, a couple a day?
I would say 2 days before I start to really make sure that I'm hydrated and ensure that I'm not putting myself in a lose scenario. But I might drink 2 the night before, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And maybe 1 earlier in the day, so I might drink 3 throughout the day. I mean, it does have a pretty high level of sodium.
I'm trying to look for that breakdown on there.
350 milligrams per tablet.
Okay.
So it's not low by any means, and it's definitely not something that you'd want to drink on a daily basis all the time, unless you were actually using the sodium. And then for meal wise, it's really just what works for you. And that's something something you have to discover.
What do you do a couple days before? Are there any foods you avoid? Do you take in more carbs? I know you focus on your sodium and staying hydrated.
I would say I would take maybe taking a little bit extra as far as carbs go, but your body just really wants something balanced, and most importantly, something that you're used to, something that you can eat. The worst thing that can happen to you is have some stomach issues, GI issues during a race. You spend 10 minutes in a bathroom. That's 10
We
minutes.
don't want to kill your time with some diarrhea or constipation.
Exactly.
What do you? Do you have a specific meal you eat the night before?
This sounds really funny, and the only reason I do it is because that's just what works for me. I actually eat Jimmy John's. I don't know if you guys have Jimmy John's out.
Yeah, sandwiches, like a pork sandwich or something.
Yeah, I get a roast beef sandwich is what I eat, and then I make sure I have an entire pickle just because there's some level. But for some reason that it works for me, so that's what I do.
Have you tried other things that seem to not, or you just that's your thing?
I would say that's more superstitious than any medical research or anything behind it. I have had chicken pasta before, or you name it, I've tried it before a race. But in my 3 fastest races that I've done, and when I felt the best, I ate Jimmy John's before. So that's just what I did. So
sounds like you're going on prior experience. Keep with it.
Exactly what it is.
What do you eat the morning of? Anything?
Yes. It's important to start with your tank full, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So you need to have a good amount of, literally just glycogen in your body, to make sure that you don't deplete that amount throughout the day. So I normally eat a bagel with peanut butter on it, and then I'll have some sort of fruit, either a banana or an apple or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll actually eat a Cliff Bar beforehand. Is just what I go for. I mean,
Yeah.
really, any sort of something that'll work for you doesn't really matter.
The-
But I try to take in three 300 to 500 calories, depending on the distance of the race. 3 hours before, two
just
hours before.
to get started. Yeah. So that's an early morning.
Yeah,
So what time's the race start?
most of them start at 7 a.m.
So then you're getting up at 5 to eat something
Yeah,
at
actually,
least.
probably earlier. I'm more nervous, so I get up pretty early anyway. I'm probably up
Wow.
by 4,
The
get everything ready.
the way I think about, fuel, you've got glucose, which is kind of the immediate in your tank kind of fuel, like it's in the
Mhm.
engine. And then your first reserve tank, glycogen, like you said, mainly that's in the liver. So when you eat before, you're filling up that tank. And then, your reserves beyond that are your fat stores. So, if you don't eat anything in the morning and you didn't eat anything in the night before, your liver's going to be empty. That first tank is going to be empty. You're going to feel that. You're going to
Yeah.
you're going to lack some energy. Okay, let's stick with nutrition. What do you eat when you're training? Let's say you're training for a couple months. How long do you train? If you're going to run an Ironman, like, are you like 6 months, 9 months, 3 months? I have no concept.
So my program was a 6 month long program, but that is someone that has done a half distance before and is comfortable riding for 2 hours and running for an hour.
You're
And
already at a pretty high level, and then you're going 6 months to get up to the full Ironman.
correct.
When it
Um,
comes to what you eat when you're training in that 6 months, on average, what does it look like for you?
as far as during my training,
Yeah.
or okay, so during, I mean, you want to try to practice everything that you're going to do on race day. So basically, all of my training, I would just take in the amount of sugar that I would need for that much of the distance. So if we had a 3 hour bike ride, I'd make sure I had enough nutrition with me for that 3 hours.
So for you, a 3 hour bike ride, how many calories and what are you doing? Gel packs or candy bars? What are you during the race?
I've tried just about everything. I tried liquid nutrition at one point. There's a company in Cincinnati. It's called Infinite,
Mm-hmm.
and I've tried that. They customize it for you. It worked very well for me. But the problem is I felt hungry.
Mm-hmm.
My stomach would rumble, and
It was all liquid, like all kind of, Gatorade-like stuff or something,
yeah,
like sugar drinks.
it's a powder mix that you mix in. It has electrolyte, sugar, everything that you need. Um, and my stomach was just hungry, so I changed from that to shot blocks is what I would use normally. So shot blocks, it's like a gummy essentially.
Okay. And it's, okay, like a little gummy candy, and that kind of filled your hunger a little more and still
Yeah,
gave you the energy you needed.
correct. And some people will really struggle with GI issues with them because they're a little bit harder to digest. But if you read the packaging, and one thing that I did discover, you have to drink water with it because it has to be, I think, a 15% carbohydrate um, combination, basically. So it's 100% when you're taking it in with the shot block. But if you dilute it with water, then it's not going to give you belly issues. But if you don't, if you just drink it, it's going to make you feel terrible.
I think we had some of those on the Tough Mudder I did a month or two ago, and I ate them and I was just like, I don't know. My gut's a little more sensitive when I'm like actively running and doing it. You never really had much stomach discomfort or cramping in your belly from eating when you're doing the race.
And I think I kind of trained myself. If I had a little bit, I kind of trained myself out of that because I ate so many of them while I was exercising. I guess I just got used to it. But there are a lot of people that do struggle with that, and to keep everything more liquid and less solid will work better for those people.
That makes sense.
So,
So when you're in your training, but you're not doing like long training things, what are you eating day to day on
uh,
average?
day to day, I try to stick to more a higher protein content of things of just food that I take in versus the fat and carbohydrate content. My big and this sounds weird, but my big motivation, I downloaded that MyFitnessPal app.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
I've
sure
used
that
that app, sure.
and basically and it's really not to tell you what to eat; it just tells you what you're eating,
To
essentially.
track
So
it. Yeah, I use it to
exactly.
track.
So I'd put it in there, and I saw, I'm eating way too many carbs, or I'm eating too much fat, and I'm staying in my calorie limit, but my carbohydrates and fat are too high, my protein's too low. So I did a complete switch when I finally saw that, and tried to really keep my protein content high.
What kind of did you break it down by percents?
I did.
What kind of percent of protein are we talking?
I tried to get closer to 30%. I
And
think
then
it's
what
just,
was your breakdown of carb and fat?
I think it was 30, 50, and 20. I think 20 fat, 30 protein, 50 carb. That's what I think I broke it down to.
So I would call that that's fairly balanced
Yeah.
approach. Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty standard.
I tried at one point to go to 40% protein and
Uh-huh.
took off 10% of my carbs,
Yeah.
just to see what that would do. And I felt that I struggled with my long distance running. I felt
Energy-wise?
didn't have the energy to do it.
So you did some experimenting and found you actually need the carbs for the energy. That's what I was curious
Yeah.
about. If you're doing a lot of training that's going to burn a lot of calories, do you increase the carbs accordingly? But it sounds like you maintained a pretty balanced, at least ratio.
hmm
Did your total daily consumption go up, like your total calories per day when you're training with that?
So, well, definitely when I'm training, I mean, I was at some points I had a couple 18 to 20 hour of training weeks. So at that point, I was very, very hungry all the time, and anything I could eat, I was happy with. But I would make an attempt to stick to something that was as not healthy, but as I would say protein higher than anything else, and try to really stay away from the fat content stuff. So
Avoid the fats.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your training. In an average week, how many hours were you putting into to training?
So at the beginning, it was about 8 to 10 hours was the maximum for at the start of that 6 months for my training program, and
Hmm.
by the end, I think my biggest week was 24 hours, which is, I mean,
That
might
is
as well be a full-time job.
that is a. I mean, if you think about it, so if you, and do you have rest days? I assume that there's a day or two of rest per week. So
Yeah, so there was one day of rest. Um,
so if you're breaking that down and divided by six, you said what, 24? That's 4 hours a day, not just like a long day of 4 hours. That's 4 hours a day. That is a huge commitment.
yeah, and I would say that it's definitely not for everybody as far as full
Time,
distance
just
goes. Yeah,
time. Like, yeah, that takes definitely some devotion and commitment.
yeah.
So, okay, so you're starting at about 10 hours a week and sometimes it goes up from there. Are you just like dividing it into, run, bike, swim? Are you using weights? Like what kind of stuff? How did you train?
Um, they recommend that you do some weight training during. With my focus, I was more focused on getting my fitness level higher, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't lift any weights during, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm also a like, kind of unique situation. I was a pretty heavy lifter during my high school and college sports careers, so I really didn't need that big one-time strength for anything. I really just need to get my as far as cardiovascular fitness up.
Because you played football in college.
Correct.
Yeah. So you
So
focused on fitness. You didn't lift weights as much. Seems like it worked for you. You don't feel like you missed out on anything in that period.
no, but for other people, I would think it would be very important to do that, to throw that in there. But once again, everything needs to be you know per person.
On
Work.
your weekly workouts, are you dividing it between just running, swimming, biking? Did you do high intensity training? Did you just like coast on kind of steady state for longer periods of time? What did that look like?
So some people use a training method. They use heart rate percentage, essentially, in zones of heart rate. So
Yep.
all of their runs need to be in a zone two, or a zone two bike ride. Swimming is a little bit different. You don't normally watch your heart rate on that. You just go for
Now,
distance.
is
But
zone two like just under your maximum? Is that what that means? Or is it more of a lower intensity? I don't know the zones off the top of my
it,
head.
it'd be a lower intensity. So zone 3, you'd be breaking into kind of more out of that endurance realm and more into our speed realm.
So for
So zone
you, at your age, what was a zone 2 heart rate?
well, I didn't train very much with that, but it'd be hanging out in the low 100s is what it would be for me. But once again, that's completely different per person. If you're, I mean, my resting heart rate hangs out around 55 right now.
Yeah,
So if your heart rate starts at 85, then everything's going to be a little bit different. But basically,
yeah, that
you're going
makes
to take
sense.
your max zone. When you hit zone 4, we're at our absolute max, and we don't want to get there. So, but there are plenty of training devices, Garmin watches, and things like that that will actually track that for you. But essentially, everything is um, not necessarily race pace. There were race pace things where if I'm going to run a 9 minute mile during my race, then that part of my training is going to be at 9 minute mile. But for my long distance stuff, it can be slower, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. They really think if I'm going to ride 21 miles an hour on my bike, every one of my rides needs to be 21 miles an hour. You can really ride 18 miles an hour for those long distance rides and do the exact same thing.
Yeah, you get the benefit of that training. Yeah. Um, so that's your training. That was your nutrition. You lost some weight over the period of this training. Over how much did you lose? Over what time?
So from when I started running, we're talking when I started running to now, it's actually closer to about 50 pounds. But
Wow.
just in the Ironman training portion, I lost 30. So in 6 months, I lost about 30 pounds.
Let me push pause on this one, and then let's do a little 5 minute where we focus on that, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We will be right back. Don't forget to go to the website, drlarry.com, to get access to Drew's tips and pointers and what he did for his Ironman. We will be right back.